Well, good morning, YouTube land out there. Welcome to our inspirational content once again. I have hope this morning. Guess what? I have hope that God is with us once again. Today is our 253rd day for this awesome Bible challenge. And we have hope that we're not ever going to go into despair. Ever, 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 ever. Yeah, we're going to need a pat on the back sometimes. Sometimes we're going to have to remember that we deserve to encourage ourselves and not depend on our emotions on other people. Sometimes we have to realize that God is the author and finisher of our course. Come on now. Let's get into this David character again today. I am just so excited about today's lesson. I hope you all have been ahead of me with this lesson. I hope it's been so interesting that you're not waiting on me to finish this book, the book of 1 Samuel. It's only a few more chapters to go, so why not just go ahead and finish on your own? I mean, we read books all the time. This is the greatest book in the world, which is the Bible. Amen. Let's get started. 1 Samuel, the 28th chapter. And I'm going to read a little bit more than just the 10 verses, just because I want us to just really understand this chapter to the best of our abilities from God. And some of you going to go back and finish reading the chapter, and some of you will not. So for the ones that won't, because of whatever reasons, you don't have to tell me. God knows all about it, and He knows your hearts. But I'm going to go ahead and go a little further. And the Bible scholars out there that want to go ahead and finish the chapter on your own, please do so and enjoy and ask God, what can I take from this lesson today? My own life. Because we're not just reading these stories just because is in the Bible. We also reading it so we can learn and apply it to our real lives, okay? And also the Bible challenge is to get us to read our Bibles. Like we already know, we have brushed that dust off our Bibles, and we stopped putting our Bibles on a shelf to stay on our shelf. You know, I always had a Bible that I used when I take to church on a regular basis. And then I had that Bible that just sat on a shelf for decorations. Baby, get that one too. Wipe that dust off that Bible and use that for the Bible challenge, and you can still use your other Bible for church services. Just give you a little tip there. Okay, let's get started. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces for war against Israel. Achish said to David, "Understand that you and your men shall go with me to battle." David said to Achish, "All right, you shall know what your servant can do." Achish said to David, "Therefore I will make you my bodyguard always." Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the wizards out of the land. And the Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine host, he was afraid. His heart trembled greatly. When Saul inquired of the Lord, he refused to answer him, either by dreams or by Urim. And the Urim was a symbol worn by the priests when seeking the will of God for Israel, or by the prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, that's between the living and the dead, that I may go and inquire of her." His servant said, "Behold, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor." So Saul disguised himself, put on other raiment, and he and 2 men with him went and came to the woman at night. He said to her, "Perceive for me by the familiar spirit, and bring up for me the dead person whom I shall name to you. The woman said, See here, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off those who are mediums and the wizards out of the land. Why then do you lay a trap for my life to cause my death? And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, As the Lord lives, there shall no punishment come to you for this. The woman said, Whom shall I bring up for you? He said, Bring up Samuel for me. And when the woman saw Samuel, she screamed, and she said to Saul, Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. The king said to her, Be not afraid. What do you see? The woman said to Saul, I see a God with a small g, terrorizing superhuman being, coming up out of the earth. He said to her, In what form is he? And she said, An old man comes up, covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and made obeisance. And Samuel said to Saul, Why have you disturbed me to bring me up? Saul answered, I am bitterly distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God, capital G this time, so the true and living God, has departed from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. Therefore I have called you, that you may make known to me what I shall do. Samuel said, Why then do you ask of me, seeing the Lord has turned from me and has become your enemy? The Lord has done to you as he said through me he would do, for he has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. And 1Samuel 15:22 through 28 talks about that. If y'all want to go back and read that, especially if you haven't read it. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, or execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also give Israel into the land of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me among the dead. Let's read that again. Moreover, the Lord will also give Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me among the dead. The Lord also will give the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. And I'm going to stop right there, because the Google summary is going to summarize the whole chapter. And woo! What a lesson, y'all. What a lesson. Let me put my Bible down for a minute, and let's do this Google summary right quick. This chapter began with the Philistines, who came to war with Israel, and they didn't come a few. The Philistines' number was so great a number, King Saul of Israel became greatly intimidated, and I bet at this time he wished he had David on his side. Remember, David was a good general and warrior for Saul. Speaking of David, the king of Gath, fully expecting David to fight alongside the Philistines in this battle, which would put David against his own people. Israel and David concurred to do so. If he said no, it would have shown who his allegiance was with, and he would have probably been killed. Saul was so scared, he did what most people do when they are at wit's end. He sought the Lord, but God did not answer him. God didn't answer by dream, prophet, idea, nothing. This was purposely so. God had moved on from Saul. So Saul did the next thing he could do to receive divine insight, which turned out to be the worst thing anyone could do. He sought after familiar spirits. He met a woman in Endor and asked her to bring up Samuel the prophet. Obviously and desperately at this point, Saul's action displays that he had absently and completely given up on God. The woman was able to bring Samuel the prophet up as Saul requested, and from that she realized who Saul was, because he had disguised himself upon approaching her. What she was doing was illegal and prohibited in Israel, and paradoxically, that was put in law by Saul himself, rather enforced by Saul, I should say, anyway. She told Saul she saw God's, small Gods, coming up out of the earth, and she saw an old man. Saul figures it was Samuel. Samuel says to Saul, "Why have you awakened me?" And Saul begins to tell whom he believed to be Samuel of his distress of the Philistines, but that God is not answering him. Samuel's response is, "If God isn't talking to you, what makes you think I will?" Samuel further reminds Saul that God stopped dealing with him because he didn't obey God. Remember the Amalek situation? 1 Samuel 15. Saul disobeyed God, and he kept King Agag alive, along with the best sheep, cattle, fat calves, and lambs. That's what happened in the first Samuel 15. And that's what separated God and Saul. That's when God actually fired Saul. Saul continued to be king on his own, but he lost the anointment of God. God wasn't in it. Even though he protected Saul from David, he didn't allow David to touch somebody that he had anointed, but Saul had fallen from grace from God as the anointed king of Israel. Okay. Samuel continues by saying, "Furthermore, God has already given your kingdom to David. And by the way, this time tomorrow, you and your sons will be dead after a battle with the Philistines." The woman was shocked and bewildered. Saul was lifeless. He could have died right there after hearing the news. Wow. Woo. This chapter ends with the woman and Saul's men forcing Saul to eat something before they left that night. Saul was a dead man walking, and he knew it. See, that's why I don't go to people that be fortune telling and all this type of stuff. I don't go to them because they might tell me something I don't want to know. And plus, it is an abomination unto the Lord. So that would be the number one reason. It is an abomination unto the Lord. The other thing would be, like I said, you might go to them for one thing and find out something else you don't want to know. Okay? If I'm going to die tomorrow, or if I'm going to die before this day is over with, guess what? Unless it's a prophet from God, because God has prophets that can give you a warning before destruction as well. You know what I mean? Now, if a prophet from God just come to me out the blue and warn me about something, that's different. But as far as me going to a psych person, what they call those, psychic person, and yeah, nah, and that's why we need to get a relationship with God, because see, Saul had failed out of that relationship with God. He used to be able to go to God and get answers and get comfort and get confirmation and all that good stuff, but he fell from the grace of God. He couldn't. I mean, in that way, he fell from the grace of God. He could not get an answer from God anymore. Yeah, and what nerve he had anyway. You know, people have the nerve to do their dirty work, and then when they get in trouble, who they run to after all? And we've done it. We've done it. Maybe we don't do it anymore, but we all have done that before. You know, some of us still doing it, but we can take this lesson today and apply it to our lives and ask God to forgive us while he can still hear us. Ask God to come into our life, come into our heart, and change our hearts, because we don't want to fall into the hands of an angry God, and we don't want God to close his ears on our requests. When we're in trouble, we want God to hear us. Amen. Okay, y'all. May God add a blessing to this lesson. And it was a little longer, but that's okay. I'm about to let y'all go now. Go on with your day. Enjoy your Monday. Stay blessed. Love y'all. Bye.